My name is Eldrick Jacobs, and I am the proprietor of Flintport Hat Company, a custom hat company. We're in Bainbridge, Georgia, and we were really inspired by the sights, the sounds, the textures of the South, the colors. So the steps in the hat making process, first is determining what felt you're going to use. We use majority beaver fur felt. A beaver fur felt is a legacy material, and it's a material that really does well with holding its shape over time. It really just presents a much higher quality product. So we choose the felt, and then we choose the hat block that we are going to use. This hat blocks are wooden blocks that we use to mold the felt over, and then we take steam and we infuse steam into the felt of the hat body. Felt is nothing more than individual fur fibers and a bioresin. And so what we're doing is softening both of those things, allowing the fur to open up, to stretch it over the block. And then we take that hat body that's now been infused with the steam and we stretch it with a lot of pressure, a lot of heat over the hat block. And it allows us to give what we call an open crown to the hat body. And then at that point we take a knot, a hatter's knot, we put it around the block and we push it all the way down to the base of the block. That allows us to create one of the most critical points of hat making, and that's the break line. The break line is the space where the crown meets the brim, and you want to get a perfect 90-degree angle there. Otherwise you'll have a hat that ends up kind of misshapen, and the brim won't lay right. We then flatten the brim with an iron, a steam iron. That allows for us to get the brim in a place where the brim can be cut later. So after we've steamed, we've blocked, and we flattened the hat brim, we let it out to dry in front of the sun. We take it back to our table, and then we brim cut by using a tool called a brim cutter. After that part, it's the really fun part, one of my favorite parts of the hat making process, and that's pouncing. Our machine dates back to 1916, and it spins the block, and we take different grits of sandpaper, and we really just try to refine the surface of the felt, and the only way you know that the hat is done in this next part is really by feel. So we're taking off the top layer, and layer by layer we're stripping the felt to a place that makes it really velvety smooth. So after we've pounced, we then fire it. So fire is a legacy part of hat making, and it's used really to clean up the fibers on the outside of the hat. We then create a sweatband for that hat.
It's one of the most important parts of hat making, because if you don't sew the sweatband in correctly or properly, the hat won't lay right on the wearer's head.
We hand sew our sweatbands in for our custom clients. We take our time and place every stitch onto the hat. Now we have this moment where what was devoid of form, a hat body, becomes a hat. In the hat that was produced, we used a grosgrain trim, which is a very sort of traditional way of finishing a hat. So we made a bow for it to go on the outside of the hat, and then we also brim bind it.
This is what makes hat making an art and skill. Is finding the right tension on this is something that takes a bunch of practice.
In the brim binding, we do use a sewing machine there so that we can get nice uniform line of thread so that your hat looks amazing.
So I'm going to take the same blocker's knot that I used to block the hat. I'm going to use it to flange it. So now what we're doing is creating a curved upturned brim. And then we'll shape the crown, and then you'll have a finished hat. All by hand, intentionally made
with a simple aesthetic. That's how we make a hat here.
In the next hour, we're going to be talking to a gentleman by the name of Anthony Gaskins, and he is a hat designer from this area. Anthony has some of the most innovative styles out here. We're going to talk to him a little bit about his history and his designs. And showcasing his designs are the women from my church, Tacoma Park Baptist Church.
In the old days, a woman wouldn't go out the house without a hat,
Right.
gloves, matching handbag, and a man, he always had a straw hat for the summer, and for the winter he always had a black hat, a navy blue hat, and a chocolate brown.
Wow.
To go to his wardrobe. So you get a lot of new people, younger guys that want to wear hats, and when they learn how it's done,
Right.
but it's funny because they'll put this on with a suit, and they'll go home after work and still wear a nice hat with a t-shirt and jeans. So fashion has kind of changed,
Evolved.
but it has also gone back to what it was.
What you're going to see coming out here is artistry. It's true artistry. But there's also some basic things that we should be looking for in all hats. Is that correct?
Well, the thing about a hat, as I told my old boss I used to work for, everybody has their own personality, and so does every hat. So when people find that right hat that suits them, it brings their inner self out. And that's what I do with my work. That's the goal of my work, to bring out something in a person they didn't know was there.
Now, I want you to see what he's done with these women that he just met. And what he's done to bring out their personalities and their styles. So we can start.
Okay, she's wearing a red cinnamon straw. All the feathers and bows are all hand done, trimmed one by one. That is an English crown with a lampshade brim. Now, this hat she's wearing, that's an asymmetrical brim, lampshade asymmetrical brim, black pheasant feather, hand trimmed, and in the center of each feather is a Swarovski crystal. Erlena's wearing a red checkerboard, asymmetrical teardrop crown is what that's called. Those are black pheasant feathers as well, hand trimmed with a Swarovski crystal in the center of each flower bud. This hat is very crisp, very clean. It's all solid tone on tone, but it's not too busy. I mean, the hat makes the statement. Cinnamon straw, hand block crown, and brim.
I really think that the hat tradition, for a lot of reasons. I think when coming from the South, you probably had a lot of outdoor meetings for church. You spent a lot of time in church, and mothers were always very busy taking care, so if they didn't have time to do their hair, a hat was perfect. Also, if you were nursing and taking care of your children, it was a good way to camouflage all the other things that you had to do.
I remember with my grandmother, we couldn't pass a church. You remember in Panama? We would have lots of churches, remember, on Avenida Central. She and I are Panamanian. And as we have these little tiny buses. What did we call them? I don't even remember the name. What? Bositos. Tiny little buses, multicolored. And if our grandmothers knew we were passing a church, they'd pull out a mantilla, they'd pull out a kerchief and slap it on your head so that you were covered. And put a vent, right. So that you know, the tradition of honoring God is so important to women.
That's right.
Well, I think, like Lydia mentioned, when in the day when women were busy raising families, and you know, you pay attention to the children, and you're trying to get those clothes ready the Saturday before. You have very little time to spend with your own hair and trying to complete your look. So many women just had black and white hats because they went with everything. A black hat would go with everything. A white hat in the summer, that was perfect. And those hats were always ready to throw on your head to cover that hair and go on to church.
Right. So this is This is a major tradition for us, and we hope it's not a dying art. We hope that it's a revitalizing art. Is that?
It is starting to come back around. So to make a long story short, is the hat fashion coming back? It is, but it's at a different pace than it's ever been before.